The Lancet is probably the world's most famous medical journal, all right? New England Journal of Medicine is probably second most famous, JAMA, third most famous. So sometime around April, I think, the Lancet published this study that concluded that hydroxychloroquine wasn't safe. This threw the world into a tizzy. Based on this article, the WHO stopped hydroxychloroquine trials across the world. The European Union stopped allowing hydroxychloroquine. That was the reason that the headlines trashed the president as calling it snake oil. They had the cover of the Lancet saying it was bad. Now, the Lancet study that said it was bad had like 90,000 people in it, and took place on 5 continents, and it just didn't really make sense. There was a group of independent doctors who looked at this data and said, there's no way you have 90,000 patients enrolled in a trial across 5 continents and nobody ever heard of this thing. It wasn't credible. So these independent doctors got together and they kind of forced it, and they forced the issue. And the Lancet ended up retracting the study, which is once in a generation or once in a lifetime sort of event. You can't be published in the Lancet by accident. There's many, many layers to it. It just simply can't happen. It was complete fraud that was published. But the damage was done because all across the world, hydroxychloroquine trials have been halted, and it was very badly maligned. That's where we're coming from. Why do we know? We know that that was fraud. They've admitted they were fraud. If you go right now to the internet, you can type in the Lancet study on hydroxychloroquine, and it'll pop up retracted, okay? Now, why do I say, so that was like level number 1 of the corruption, where the scientists themselves were being corrupted. Level number 2, though, is the media lying. How do we know they're lying and not just misinformed or ill-informed themselves? Well, because when it was retracted, they buried the story of it being retracted. You have to really struggle to find that information. That's very dishonest. And then there's corruption really at the state level and at the federal level, but we'll save that for another day. So let's talk about these, what I call, I think it's most properly called experimental biological agents. You might hear me use that phrase. Definitely you should not be calling this the COVID-19 vaccines. The reason is, whatever you call it, it's experimental. So there's a question if this vaccine, a biological agent I should say, affects this thing called the syncytial trophoblast, which is a layer on the placenta. Now, it does seem to do that when you're sick with COVID-19. The problem is that these mRNA vaccines kind of mimic having COVID-19 indefinitely. So while COVID-19 could be bad for the placenta and the baby if you get it like in the middle of the pregnancy, eventually COVID-19 goes away and you go about your life and then you're good. There's a question if this type of experimental agent does that same negative effect to the syncytial trophoblast layer of the placenta, and it would do it indefinitely. This is not a conspiracy. As a scientist, I'm telling you, we don't know. We don't know. Scientists better than me, right? There's the 2 guys in Europe that were ex-Pfizer executives that complained about this and filed a petition with the European equivalent of the FDA, saying you've got to not approve this as an emergency experimental vaccine because we haven't answered the question on the antibody-dependent enhancement, and we haven't answered the question on the placenta. It hasn't been answered, that it's dangerous to release this. And you have to put that together with what is the risk of even having this problem. Certainly in younger women, right? Women under 50, the survival, we said, per the CDC, is 99.98%. For that reason, America's Frontline Doctors feels very strongly that you cannot even offer this to women of childbearing age. So, and we'll get to our official recommendations at the end. But we put that information under the category of what we don't know. We simply don't know. We don't know what the effect is permanently on the placenta. Another fact that is very concerning is that pharmaceuticals who manufacture these experimental biological agents are immune from all liability. So this group probably knows that, but I'm not saying that they have a negative motive. I think mostly they have a profit motive. I'm not saying they're trying to hurt people or kill people. What I am saying is that if you know that you could be sued and pay out millions of dollars every single time something goes wrong, you're really, really careful, okay? You're a little less careful if you know you're going to be shielded from that liability, and they're completely shielded. So when people ask me, am I going to take the vaccine? Would I recommend my children take the vaccine? I said it's really irrational to take a brand new, untested, untried technology from a company that's completely shielded from immunity. When on the other hand, I've got a drug that's 65 years old, has been given billions of times, completely safe for all age groups, right?